I unearthed the creepiest disasters in history that still haunt the living today. I never should have opened that door. The chilling dread washed over me like ice water. I stood there, heart pounding, remembering my normal life just moments before. I had been in my cozy apartment, remote in hand, watching a documentary on strange historical events. It was a Saturday night, the kind where you curl up with snacks and lose yourself in others' fears, never imagining they'd pull you in two, but then thump. My breath caught. A sound, like something heavy dropping in the hallway. I felt a tingle at the nape of my neck, goosebumps prickling my skin. The air grew cold. I could almost taste the metal of terror on my tongue. Shadows slithered along the walls, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. I grabbed my phone, the bright screen dim in the dusky room. Just your imagination, I told myself, but the creeping fear stole my voice. What if something lurked in the dark? The shadows shifted, teasing light away as if it were their enemy. Another thump echoed, louder this time. Panic rippled through my chest, a tight coil of unease that I ventured into the narrow corridor, footsteps echoing through the silence like gunshots. The old boards creaked beneath me, a hesitant warning. My senses tingled, my heart raced. I pressed my ear against the wall, straining to hear beyond the chaos in my mind. Was it the wind? Or something more sinister, lurking just beyond view? Then, a sudden clatter from the living room drew me back. I turned and ran, adrenaline pumping. My palms were clammy against the cool doorknob. I flung the door open. The darkness pooled inside like thick smoke. My pulse drummed loudly in my ears as I scanned the empty room, but it wasn't empty. Something shifted in the corner of my eye. A figure tall and impossibly still, cloaked in shadows. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own fear. My scream echoed in the suffocating silence, but it wouldn't come. Just a strangled gasp escaped my lips. The air crackled with an unspeakable tension, as if the very fabric of reality was about to rip apart. Then the lights flickered like a dying heartbeat. The figure stepped closer, revealing not a face, but a void gaping and hungry. I froze, unable to move, breath caught in my throat. And then the door slammed shut behind me. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I stumbled backward, my heart racing against the confines of my chest, desperately searching for a way to escape the suffocating darkness that was closing in around me. The sensation of being swallowed whole surged over me, intensifying as the void of the figure stretched, warping the air like a twisted reflection in a cracked mirror. It radiated weight, a deep-seated darkness that promised nothing but despair and unearthly dread. Please let me go, I managed to whisper, but the words were devoured by the thick silence that clung to the walls. My heart pounded louder, the sound melding with the growl of an unseen predator lurking just out of reach. I turned, rattling the doorknob frantically as if by sheer force of will, I could unhinge reality itself, but that door didn't budge. Instead, a chill enveloped me, a viscous wave of despair that sunk into my bones. The shadows writhed, undulating like a living tapestry, and a low, guttural groan echoed from within their grasp. With bolstered resolve, I glanced back at the thing in the corner. It loomed larger, its featureless presence expanding as it began to coil and twist, revealing indistinct forms that flickered like dying embers. My stomach turned as I realized I wasn't alone in this room. The flickering lights painted glimpses of shapes behind it, writhing and contorting like a horde of lost souls trapped in some eternal nightmare. It was not just an entity, it was a gate to horrors unbidden, memories of tragedies and disasters that bled into my reality. The very air trembled with the weight of history. Lost voices laced with agony seeped into my consciousness, dragging me down into their depths. I felt their cold touch pour into my mind, flooding it with glimpses of things that should never be seen, faces twisted in endless torment, cries of despair echoing through the ages, the smell of charred remnants of discarded hopes. Panicked and frantic, I whipped around, searching for escape, but all corners conspired to trap me. The figure lurked behind my back, its presence stretching beyond the corporeal, threading through the air, thickening like a fog that sought to choke out the last remnants of light. A mistake. This was all a mistake. Suddenly, a jarring crash shattered the haunting silence. I wheeled to face the origin of the sound, my breath quickening. A closet door had flown open, splintering against the wall with a force that echoed like thunder. Faint, flickering light spilled out, illuminating a cryptic symbol that glowed ominously on the floor. In an instant, shadows poured from the closet as if they were alive, pooling around my feet, trying to grasp at my ankles, pulling me toward that infernal gateway. My throat tightened as I stumbled, desperately trying to shake free from their grasp. The void behind me shifted closer, its presence radiating an insatiable hunger. Get away! I screamed, finding voice through sheer terror. The shadows recoiled at my cry, but the figure remained unfazed, a pulsing mass of darkness that throbbed in rhythm with my heartbeat. The room tilted, the very structure of reality bending under the weight of an unseen force, and in that moment, the symbols on the floor flared to life with a searing brightness. It was no longer a mere symbol, it was an invocation, a beckoning to the abyss. The shadows intensified, twisting into grotesque forms that settled into ghastly faces, staring at me with vacant eyes, mouths moving in a silent cacophony of anguish. They were echoes of lost histories, and I was now a part of their macabre tapestry. My heart raced as I understood, this was not merely a haunting, it was a communion with the very essence of despair. As the entity finally moved closer, a new realization struck me. Illumination from the symbols began to pulse, revealing a familiar scene from the documentary I had watched earlier, an event of mass tragedy on the very lands where I stood now. My own life had unwittingly intertwined with theirs, forged in the fires of their anguish. In the chaos of confusion, the door behind me rattled violently, bursting open to reveal the outside world shrouded in mist, and from the depths of that obscurity, a creeping laughter echoed, a cacophony of voices twisted into paralyzing mirth. I was no longer certain whether I could trust the light of safety beyond the threshold, nor the shadows that beckoned me back to the room. As the howls rose to a fever pitch, the realization struck me. Symbols on the floor were not just part of a story, they were a trap, a call to arms for something worse than the void itself. The floor beneath me cracked, fissures worming their way toward that pulsating symbol, and as I wrestled with the fear clenching my throat, the goading darkness surged forward, an unrelenting wave of despair that promised to reclaim me. And then, I felt a sharp tug on my ankle, pulling me back as the figures screamed in unison, "Join us!" The ground crumbled beneath me, and as I grasped for the last vestige of solid ground, I glanced back into the void. For a fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of that mirror reflecting not just horrors untold but 1,000 bleak futures, each worse than the last. And the laughter began again, louder, consuming the air until the walls themselves seemed to shudder. With a final shriek of despair, I knew I was about to be enveloped by it all, and as darkness engulfed me, the sickening truth set in: would I become just another whisper lost in the echoes of a horrific past? And then, everything went black. I drifted through the void, weightless and disoriented, as time lost its meaning in the abyss. I was a puppet, tangled in a tapestry of pain that told stories of countless tragedies, of fires that devoured families, of crushing floods that swallowed whole towns, of wars that turned fields into rivers of blood. Their memories clung to me, festering wounds opened anew. Suddenly, a surge of consciousness fractured the darkness. My senses returned, raw and overwhelmed. I lay on a cold stone floor, slick with an unknown liquid that chilled my skin. I blinked against the dim light, my surroundings coming into focus. This was no longer the familiar confines of my home. Instead, I was in a cavernous space laden with the smell of decay and whispers that brushed against my ears like the sighs of the forgotten. The walls pulsed faintly, echoing a heartbeat as if the very structure was alive. the flickering light above illuminated the origins of the viscous pool I lay in. It surrounded the remnants of broken shields and splintered weapons, artifacts of a forgotten battlefield, each one a testament to the human suffering that had occurred here. I staggered to my feet, shaking debris from my clothes, my heart pounding with a primal instinct to flee, but the air crackled with an energy that held me in place. I could feel the very spirits of the lost, wrapped in layers of sorrow, brushing past me, drawn toward an unseen force. A deeper pull tugged at my being, igniting an insatiable curiosity in the pit of my stomach. I felt their plight, echoes of their despair gnawing at me, a pang of guilt for having stumbled upon their domain. In the corner of the cavern, I spotted a stone altar, draped in tattered cloth that fluttered like dried leaves brushing against the wind. It was adorned with more symbols, convoluted and arcane, intertwined with vines that seemed to pulse with the same light that flickered above. The air thickened as I approached, my pulse quickening with every step. I had to know. As I reached out to touch the altar, a cold breeze spiraled around me, engulfing me in a shroud of whispers. Set us free, release us, the voices harmonized, a chorus laden with desperation that sent chills down my spine. The fabric of reality warped, distorting the altar's surface until it revealed myriad reflections, brief snippets of moments before devastation, families laughing blissfully, a child chasing fireflies, lovers weaving dreams together, all abruptly interrupted by anguish. I stumbled back, clutching my temples, overwhelmed by their pain, manifesting in my mind as vivid flashes of horror, the ancient tales overlapping with my own fleeting thoughts, revealing my history steeped in grief I never wanted to confront. They were seeking solace in me, demanding letters of release that I could not possibly write. In that moment, the shadows around me converged, morphing into ghastly figures adorned with bloodied remnants of their lives, their mouths opening wide in silence, voiceless eruptions of agony etched on their faces. They reached toward me with gnarled hands, urging me to take part in the offering, to unlock the dimensions of suffering buried deep within them. Become one of us, surrender, they pleaded in a chilling symphony. I recoiled instinctively, the terror searing through me like fire. An uneasy tremor rippled through the ground, causing the altar to crack and groan. I stumbled backward, the spirits writhing, their emotions merged into a tangible desperation that seeped deep into my bones. I recognized one face amidst the Chosin old woman I had seen in photographs, whose story haunted the margins of my family history, a story I had brushed aside. She reached for me, pleading silently, her eyes wells of sorrow. I knew then that I had unearthed something much larger than myself. These spirits were bound to me, tangled in a web of time that demanded acknowledgement. They had infused my very essence with their anguish, pulling me toward a fate that seemed inescapable. Suddenly, the echoes shifted, punctuated by the sound of snapping bones and grinding earth. The once steady heartbeat of the cavern crescendoed into a frantic rhythm as the shadows grew restless, coils of darkness wrapping around my legs, pulling me once again towards the altar. Join us. Embrace the truth. They screamed as I fought against their strength. With one last desperate surge, I launched myself away from the spectral throng, crossing the boundary of the altar just as it erupted into a blinding light. The explosion reverberated through the chamber, the sickly sweet scent of burning echoes fuming the air. I felt myself being catapulted through a searing tunnel, both mesmerizing and terrifying, the whispers gaining volume, blending into an apocalyptic chorus, and then everything faltered. The light vanished, plunging me back into a darkness even more profound than before, and before I could gather my bearings, I sensed the presence of the entity again. The air shifted around me, and a wave of cold swept over my skin, sending creeping dread coursing through my veins. As the shadows closed in again, I realized I didn't just awaken their suffering, I might be the very key to their liberation or their eternal damnation. But before I could wrestle with that realization, the ground rumbled, and the echo of that familiar laughter reached my ears once more, teasing me out of the almost conquering despair. Come play, it beckoned, the call resonating within the marrow of my bones, an invitation I both dreaded and yearned to answer. Before I could react, the weight of shadows pressed down upon me, wrapping around my throat, a noose tightening with crushing force, pulling me down into realms unseen. I gasped for breath as everything turned to static, an endless sea of black, the laughter trailing off into a haunting reverberation that promised only tribulations yet to come. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the world went silent once more. As the silence settled, an unsettling quiet wrapped around me like a funeral shroud, enveloping my senses. In the muted darkness, I felt unmoored adrift in an endless void, as if the very fabric of reality had frayed. I couldn't see, couldn't move, but I could still feel the pulse of something malignant lurking just beyond the edges of my perception, a presence that breathed with eagerness, coiled and ready to strike. The laughter had faded, but remnants of its chilling resonance lingered in the air, refusing to let me forget its sinister invitation. I strained to listen, fighting against the oppressive silence, scanning the depths of my surroundings for any hint of comfort. Yet, in that stillness, I realized the cavern was alive with its own breathing, a low and guttural sound that rumbled beneath my feet, rattling my bones. Tentatively, I shifted and the ground felt different now, trembling beneath my weight. The very earth was restless, a warning pulsing through me like a countdown to an inevitable calamity. It seemed as if the shadows were swirling and solidifying, conjuring a dizzying array of shapes, whispers escalating into frantic murmurs that danced around my mind. "Release us, you must see." I closed my eyes against the weight of those words, but the visions erupted before me nonetheless, flashes of cataclysm, devastation rising from the depths like rising smoke, the malice of unseen eyes watching and waiting. Each blink conjured new terror, San Inferno consuming trees as beasts roamed beneath the ashen sky, desperate screams carried by the wind, a child wandering lost among the flames, a tidal wave sweeping away everything in its path. I wanted to cry out, to scream in protest of these horrors, but my voice was stifled, choked by an invisible force. Just as quickly, the visions flickered and shifted, revealing glimpses of the lost spirits I had encountered earlier. Their faces morphed, contorted in agony, their mouths agape as they whispered a lament I could neither understand nor escape. I could sense that they were not merely victims, they were emissaries waiting to reveal their secrets, a truth that reeked of ancient malice. With growing dread, I felt a sharp chill lancing through me, an icy finger trailing along my spine, as if something profound was close to awakening. Panic clawed at the edges of my consciousness as the shadows coalesced, swirling into a vortex that seemed to draw everything toward a center only they could perceive. "Help us." A child's voice cut through the din, clear and desperate, punctuated by a heart-wrenching sob. I swung my head toward the source, instinctively reaching out into the dense gloom. "Please don't leave us." My heart leapt, the chill now replaced by something warm, a flicker of hope, or perhaps it was just another trap laid by the shadows. I couldn't tell. But driven by an inexplicable surge, I pressed onward. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out the ominous whispers that warned of dangers I could not comprehend. Then, without warning, a flash of light shattered the darkness, momentarily illuminating a grotesque visage, one of the spirits, its face twisted in anguish, reaching out towards me with skeletal fingers as it loomed ever closer. "You must know before it's too late," as the figure gestured wildly, revealing behind it a shattered landscape, a rippling expanse of ash and ruin. I felt the ground shudder beneath me again, more violently this time, as if the very world was fracturing. I stumbled, and terror swelled in my throat, realizing the light wouldn't hold forever. I needed to fight against the tide, yet my limbs felt chained by the weight of the past. That in a final attempt to survive, I screamed. I screamed not just for myself, but for all of them, the spirits ensnared in agony. I begged for release, for clarity, for understanding. The shadows shifted in response, swirling with vicious intensity. The chilling laughter erupted anew, echoing grotesquely as the cavern morphed, the walls closing in, and the ground rippling like water. I gasped for breath amidst the cacophony, knowing that whatever lay ahead would draw me deeper into a labyrinth of despair. And then, as if the very essence of despair could manifest, the altar flickered once more to life, its light radiating against the darkness, revealing an incomprehensible truth. A door between realms began to open, the air thick with malice, and with it, a new horror emerged, an insatiable entity, dark and vast, stretching endlessly beyond the horizon of the hidden chamber. Just as I prepared for the worst, the echoes of the past collided with a deafening silence, and a figure stepped forth from The shadows, pulling me back to a familiar torment I could not outpace. "Join us," it whispered seductively. "It's time to remember." I couldn't move, couldn't resist, and in that moment of gripping dread, I realized, with chilling clarity, that I wasn't just a key to their liberation, maybe I was also the final piece of an ancient puzzle that would unleash horrors yet unimagined. And then everything collapsed into darkness again, but not without an echo of a child's laughter lingering in the air, a laughter that promised to haunt me eternally as I was drawn toward the edge of a reality that yearned to swallow me whole. The darkness was thicker now, a palpable entity that surged around me in waves, suffocating every hope and thought. I found myself encased in a cold fog, each breath a tremor in the unnerving stillness that followed the chilling promise whispered in the shadows. "It's time to remember." But remember what? The echoes of that child's laughter twisted through the air like a knife, slicing at the sinew of my sanity. I stumbled forward, guided by an instinctive dread that urged me deeper into the cavern. The weight of eternity pressed down on me, and the shadows flickered, writhing as if they gained strength from my fear. As I moved, the soft crunch of gravel beneath my feet changed sporadically to a softer texture, something like fabric or skin. The thought sent a jolt of revulsion racing through me, and I forced myself to look down, my heart racing. Beneath my shoes, the ground pulsed as if alive, squirming and shifting with an unsettling familiarity. I recoiled as a moist whisper slipped past my ear, barely audible. "Stay, don't leave." Against my better judgment, I pressed on, compelled by an urgency I didn't understand. The walls of the cavern shifted around me, expanding and contracting like the lungs of a beast drawn from slumber. Each inhalation brought forth a tangible despair that binded me tighter in its grasp. All traces of light faded into the rippling darkness as spectral forms began to filter in and out of my vision, a multitude of souls marching, their faces frozen in despair, driven by thoughts of lost time and forsaken hope. Suddenly, one figure broke away from the throng, its eyes wide and pleading. "You're here to save us, aren't you? You have to help us before they come for you." Desperation dripped from its voice, a chilling lament that clawed at my chest. "They're awakened and they're hungry for you," my heart pounded in response, a drumbeat of foreboding screaming through me. I had read tales of haunted places before, each story laced with shadowy hints of unspeakable acts and tragic ends, but this felt visceral, looming like a grave specter ready to suck the very essence of life from my being. The entity that had opened the door before me must surely possess the intent to claim its prize, a soul torn from life's tapestry, captured in a cycle of torment. No. I shouted, my voice a desperate challenge against the overwhelming dread. It echoed back a hollow sound, offering no assurance. The cavern rumbled, and the shadows stirred, forming an undulating maw that seemed to yearn for my very existence. Behind me, the ground trembled as I sensed movement, a creeping sensation that something vile writhed beneath the surface, eager to breach this world. I turned, moth to a flame, drawn to an inevitable confrontation. As I stared into the dark void, the laughter grew, thickening with malice, reverberating off stone walls that offered no refuge. Feed us, a cacophony of voices surrounded me, the cacophony of unseen terrors vibrating in my very core. You are one of us now. The words sliced through the air, crashing against my skull, igniting the swirling muck of memories long buried. Visions flooded my Mindan altar steeped in blood, monstrous figures chanting's darkest incantations, and the faces of those I loved twisted in agony as they succumbed to despair. Now you understand, you are the key to our freedom and our food. A powerful surge of energy pulsed from the shadows, wrapping chains of darkness around my limbs, pulling tighter with every syllable uttered. I was caught between the cries of the damned and my own panicked breaths, racing against the inevitability that awaited me at the edge of this abyss. Just as I reached for the echoes of my own identity, a sudden snap punctured the chaotic symphony wrapping itself around me. From beneath the floor, a hand broke free, a skeletal, glimmering appendage adorned with remnants of past lives, clawing upward with desperate hunger. I gasped, stepping back as the darkness writhing around it parted to reveal a mirror. Reflecting me but twisted, features marred with shadow and devoid of essence, a hollow echo of the person I once was. And behind me, the wails crescendoed, a cacophony that promised I would not be leaving this cavern intact. "Join us," the voices demanded, a shrill choir mingling with the insatiable shadows that surged forth to envelop me entirely. I froze, horrified, as the realization dawned this was not merely a doorway to madness, it was a portal to annihilation, and I stood at the precipice, aching to plummet into the void of their ravenous longing. Just as I turned to flee, the mirror shattered with a spine-chilling roar, erupting into 1,000 pieces that reflected the tormented souls above, swirling in a whirlwind of despair. In that instant, I saw their faces, twisted with hunger and desire, and among them was my OWN.AS. I stood trembling, the fragments ceased to glimmer and, gripped by a paralyzing dread, my voice caught in my throat. I realized with horrifying clarity, I would either succumb to despair or be dragged into the very depths of their furious hunger. And I had but moments to decide. With a final scream of defiance reverberating against the evils that sought to claim me, I ran toward the encroaching dark. I ran straight into what I feared the most, every breath a countdown to my fate, hoping against hope that I might find a path through the chaos. But behind me, an ominous laughter crescendoed, echoing through the darkness, as the last flickers of light faded from my reach. The note of despair thickened, clutching at my lungs like the fingers of a corpse seeking to drag me into its embrace. I stumbled through the winding passages of the cavern, disoriented and desperate. The swirling shadows were alive, gnashing like teeth against the fragile barrier of my sanity. With every step I took, a hollow resonance filled the air, a sound reminiscent of hollow laughter, but darker, punctuated with venomous hunger. I could hear them now, the whispers of the lost souls mingling with the sound of my own ragged breathing. "He's here," they called to one another, "he's here." Their thin, ghostly voices twined around me, inciting visions of great ruins buried deep beneath the earth where terrible rituals had taken place. Each heartbeat drummed louder, drowning out my thoughts as I pressed forward, fueled by sheer instinct and the primal instinct to survive. Suddenly, a flicker of light caught my eye, a faint glow illuminating an alcove just beyond my reach. With no time to consider the danger, I surged toward it, thoughts of finding an escape driving me. The light pulsed, a stuttering beacon in the pitch-black depths, tempting me forward as if it sensed my anguish and sought to soothe it. As I rounded the corner, the glow exploded into brilliance, revealing a sight so appalling that I staggered back, horror clenching my heart. It was an altar, crafted painfully from jagged stone and darkened bone, smeared with the remnants of what appeared to be an ancient offering. I recoiled, my foot slipping on the slick surface beneath me, and I glanced down to see the ground writhe once more, this time pulling in the debris of previous struggles, a macabre quilt of skin, hair, and desolation. In that moment of awful clarity, I understood, this place was a tomb, but not just any tomb. It housed the remnants of countless lives devoured by the darkness, their essence now part of this ghastly construct. They had not merely succumbed, they had become part of the sinister fabric of this realm. And now, they were stretching their twisted hands toward me, inviting me to join their ranks. I stiffened, the chill of realization wrapping itself around my spine. On the altar lay a tattered tome, its pages fluttering as if stirred by some unseen wind. Drawn instinctively, I stumbled forward, the whispers growing into a howling tempest. "Read it to us," they cried. "Unlock the door." A flash of memory ignited within, a buried truth clawing its way back to the surface. I remembered the tales whispered around the hearth, warnings of those who delved too deeply into ancient knowledge. Yet, here it was, beckoning me, the keys to understanding lingering just beyond my reach. As my fingertips brushed against the grim pages, a cold dread swept through me, a premonition that unraveling the secrets hidden within would not bring salvation but would instead open further channels of torment. But the relentless urges of the lost souls crashing over me surged like tidal waves. My heart raced against the choking fear as I began to read. The words slithered from my mouth, each syllable steeped in the remnants of malevolence. They spoke of sacrifices and binding spells, of opening the void to appease those that dwelled in darkness. As I recited the incantation, echoes of ancient screams reverberated through the chamber, in rapidly encroaching insanity. The shadows surged forward, solidifying into a massive form that loomed over the altar, a grotesque entity forged from my nightmares. It was faceless, yet I could feel its gaze burning into my soul, hungry, eager for the moment of my reckoning. "You have awakened us," it boomed, sounding both sorrowful and ecstatic, and I could feel a rippling wave of energy coursing through me, transforming, binding me inexplicably to this cursed place. No. I screamed, desperation clawing at my throat. I didn't mean to, but the cavern had changed irrevocably. The shadows that I once feared now looked upon me as kin. "You are ours," they sang, a haunting melody woven from grief and chaos, wrapping around my mind and crushing my spirit. With a final surge of strength, I turned to flee, but the darkness bound me, wrapping my limbs in chains of grief and Malisea, a prison forged by their torment. I tore against the grip, gasping as I felt pieces of my essence begin to dissolve, pulled into the gaping black mouth ready to swallow me whole. That I lunged back toward the altar, feeling the thrum of the spell still lingering beneath my fingertips, when a new presence cut through the darkness, a shiver racing through my spine as I turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows. It was a child, with sunken eyes and pale skin, an apparition so impossibly fragile it mirrored the lost souls hanging around me, yet it radiated a clarity amidst the chaos. Tears brimmed in its eyes as it whispered, "You don't belong here," before reaching out a hand toward me, the light of understanding illuminating the spaces around it. But before I could move, a rush of shadows enveloped the child, pulling it back into the abyss. The faces of thousands twisted in agony at the sight, drawing me deeper into the unending darkness, their howls drowning out my scream as everything blurred into eternal night. And then, just as I thought I was lost forever, I felt a tug, a whisper amidst the ruin, promising hope and freedom. But was it real, or merely another trick of the shadows, luring me deeper? I had to decide: would I chase the fleeting promise of escape, or confront the horrors lying just beneath the surface? The darkness swirled, hungry and insatiable, as I was left teetering on the edge of both consciousness and oblivion. The echo of my frantic heartbeat drowned out the whispers, my breath rapid and shallow as I fought with the bindings of despair constricting my chest. The child had evaporated like morning mist, leaving nothing but the hollow shell of hope in its wake. I stared into the swirling mass that devoured the chamber, paralyzed between instinctive flight and the alluring call of an uncertain destiny. "Let go," the darkness hissed, voices colliding in a frenzied cacophony. "Let us make you one of us." The shadows lunged again, fingers clawing for the contours of my skin. I braced myself, desperately searching for a weapon against this encroaching inevitable. The altar remained unchanged, a grim sentinel pulsating with dark potential, its grim texture gleaming with the remnants of the past. The tome lay still, its final words echoing mockingly in my mind, "Unlock the void." A chill swept over me, igniting a wave of adrenaline. I could still recite the incantation that had summoned the entity, but what if the knowledge it held also contained the key to my liberation? Desperation clawed at my insides, and I lunged forward, snatching the tome. The pages fluttered wildly as if recoiling from my touch, yet I pressed on, each line a revelation steeped in dread. "Tremble at the darkness," I murmured, and with it, an electric surge crackled in the air. The cavern trembled in response, the stones screaming underground as ancient energies shifted. Suddenly, the shadows recoiled, hissing like serpents. I sensed something changing. Cracks wormed through the Gothic stylings of the cavern walls, seeping with cold malice, threatening to spill forth everything the cavern harbored. "Morsel of life!" shrieked the entity, its form wretchedly undulating, shifting from one grotesque visage to another. "You are nothing in the face of what you have awakened." I squeezed my eyes shut, chanting louder, desperation fueling each syllable. As the words spilled forth, I felt reality fracturing around me until the ground heaved, groaning as though awakening from a fitful slumber. The altar began to tremble, the stones vibrating ominously as unearthly forces thrummed beneath. The shadows eclipsed the altar, pulling me into the depths of their spiral as screams roared in protest. "We will not be contained. We will not be forgotten." The voices merged into a symphony of rage and sorrow. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A distant glow erupted from a narrow fissure in the wall, an almost inviting light that clawed its way through the thick black, braiding warmth into the ache of dread. The light called, a siren song that threatened to drown the suffocating darkness threatening to engulf me. "What do you choose?" The voices taunted, wrapping around me like chains. The vile comforts of despair, or the harsh lessons of light, driven by instinct, I fell toward the light, letting it guide my path. My heart surged as I tore through the veil of shadows. With every rush of fear, each pulsating heartbeat drove me closer, offering the whisper of salvation, but as I neared the fissure, a colossal arm made of darkness reached out, clawed fingers threatening to drag me back to that endless abyss. I was wedged between opposing forces, the snare of darkness and the fragile glimmer of hope. In a split second, intuition took over, and I lunged for the light. No! Bellowed the entity, its howl piercing through the madness, as if a ripple of fear echoed through all that lay dim. The tunnel darkened further, shadows streaming like liquid towards me, threatening to consume the last remnants of my will. The fissure beckoned, illuminating an end to this relentless hell, but the darkness surged forward, howling in anguish. With a final push, I dove into the blinding light, pain seared through me, an electric shock consuming every fiber of my being as I was engulfed by the radiance. My vision blurred, images flickering beyond comprehension until the blinding light exploded. I landed hard on the ground, panting, heart racing as I fought to regain my senses. The air was filled with the acrid smell of burnt earth, swathed in intoxicating warmth. I braced myself against the rough terrain, looking around, but I found no sanctuary. Instead, I stood at the maw of a forsaken village, the cobblestone streets slick with slick rain, crumbling houses casting elongated shadows over graves. Wisps of darkness persisted here, lurking in corners and under dilapidated steps. The whispers began anew, but now they were more distinct, echoing with a near familiarity that sent chills racing down my spine. I felt eyes upon me, and as dread crept closer, I realized the ground beneath me was not empty. It was a tapestry of agony, threads woven from lives long extinguished. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a tall, gaunt silhouette with hollow eyes that bore into my soul. "Welcome home," it crooned, a voice dripping with despair. "You've brought us what we need. Time to awaken the cycle." And with that, the tremors of reality began to shift again, as filaments of darkness slowly seeped into the air, binding me to the Villahe, a new chapter woven into the tapestry of despair. I was caught, straddling the precipice between the light and accursed destiny incarnate. You are the key. The figure hissed, and I felt my heart drop into the deepest, darkest pit as I realized my nightmare had just begun. As the whispers swelled, cascading around me like a living tide, my breath caught in a stranglehold of terror. The village loomed dense and suffocating, a maze of despair and sorrow. The figure, a twisted semblance of humanity, stepped closer, revealing the grotesque details of its emaciated form. Each movement was deliberate, each step towards me tainted with insatiable hunger. "Join us," it crooned, the echo of lost souls intertwined with its words. "You are the bridge between this world and the shadows beyond, the harbinger of what lies hidden in the deep." Instinctively, I took a step back, my pulse thunderous in my ears, matching the relentless drum of the storm brewing overhead. Dark clouds roiled above, pregnant with an oily rain that began to fall, splattering against the cobblestones with a sound reminiscent of weeping. "Where am I?" I whispered, my voice a shaky echo against the bitter wind. The village offered no signs, no remnants of life, only the overwhelming sense that I had stumbled into a rift in time, a sanctuary for the forsaken. Here, the ghastly figure gestured towards the gathering shadows that coalesced into unsettling forms. "Here is where the forgotten whisper the secrets of those who once walked upon the earth. Here is where despair awakens." A wave of nausea swept through me as I tried to comprehend the truth behind its words. Memories clawed their way to the surface, flashes of pain, lament, and twisted faces etched in fear. The suffering of those lost to time reverberated within me, reaching out for my very essence. "Let them show you how they suffered," it beckoned, and as if commanded, the shadows swirled and materialized into silhouettes of anguished souls, some trapped in an eternal cycle of torment, others pleading with vacant eyes. The cacophony of cries surged, a disjointed symphony of despair that pierced through my resolve. I staggered, grappling for stability as horror wormed its way into my heart. Each figure represented a fragment of pain, a moment stolen from time, replaying endlessly beneath the weight of their burdens. "Listen," the creature urged, its hollow gaze imploring me to see beyond my own fear. "Listen to their stories. Embrace them, they will make you whole." but I don't want to be whole. I screamed, desperation fueling my words. I don't want any of this. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet trembled violently. The cobblestones cracked open, oozing ash-gray tendrils that whipped around my ankles, pulling me into the darkness. I had become a part of their suffering, caught in their endless loop of horror. "We need you," the figure insisted, its voice now a twisted symphony, coaxing me deeper into the oblivion. "You are the anchor, the one who will bring forth the revival. Embrace it." I stumbled back, the walls of reality closing in as the very air thickened with dread. I could feel fingers brushing against my skin, damp and cold, their touch igniting my worst fears. Each ghostly whisper layered itself into a singular message: we are no longer alone. We are reborn through you. Struggling to breathe, panic coiled in my throat, and then I saw Hera, child silhouette emerging from the shadows. The faintest glimmer of light surrounded her, a soft halo amidst the horror, yet her eyes were hollow, drenched in the weight of centuries. "Help me," she whispered, her small voice crackling like broken glass, dragging me toward an abyss of overwhelming agony. "Do not listen to her." The dark figure roared, lunging forward, desperate to lash out against what the girl represented. "She is but a remnantipulse of what used to be. You belong with us." "No!" I screamed, twisting away from the darkness, grasping desperately at the light surrounding the child. I reached for her, my heart racing, wanting to pull her back into the warmth of the living. But as our fingers almost touched, chilling laughter erupted behind me, and the shadows lunged en masse, their grasping limbs seeking to tear me apart. "No!" I howled, and the earth shuddered, my mind a cacophony of cries and laughter engulfing me. And then, in an agonizing heartbeat, the ground split open beneath me, dragging me into the abyss of lives lost. Me scream swallowed by the void as the darkness consumed everything, that I was pulled into a new realm, void of sensation. Silence flooded my senses, and I realized with a jolt that I was in an infinite space. Shadows wove around me like shifting smoke, taunting me from all sides. "Welcome to eternity," they sang in unison, their voices harmonizing in terrifying delight. "You will never escape." As I fought to scream, the oppressive silence smothered my cries, and just as I felt the last flickers of my consciousness fade, a haunting visage emerged from the depth of the shadows, a face so familiar, it sent a jolt of recognition through me. It was Mine, a twisted reflection of my own visage, warped and grinning with malevolence. "You cannot run," it taunted, and right then, I understood that I had only just begun to plunge into the depths of terror that awaited beyond reason and sanity. The silence grew dense, oppressive as though it had weight, suffocating my frantic thoughts. The shadow enveloped me, swirling like a storm of despair as the echoes of those tortured souls reverberated in my mind, a terrifying symphony of anguish that intensified with every breath. "Eternity is but a whisper," my doppelganger sneered, its expression a grotesque mask of glee. "You'll see them all, every life consumed by their anguish. You will witness their pain and it will become yours." In that moment, a vision engulfed me. A dark landscape materialized before my eyes, thick with fog and the stench of decay. A dilapidated house emerged from the murk, its windows gaping like hollow eyes. Each pane was smeared with a thick, black grime, while the door hung askew, creaking mournfully as the wind howled through the cracks. "Welcome home," my twisted version whispered, before fading into the swirling shadows, leaving me trembling in the void. The haunting invitation lingered, echoing in my psyche, an inescapable pull towards the specter of that ominous structure. I felt an alluring urgency, urging me to enter, to discover the horrors that lay within. Steeling myself against the encroaching dread, I reached out towards the remnants of a door that had stood against the onslaught of the ages. My fingers brushed against splintered wood, and the door creaked open with a cry of anguish that reverberated through my bones. As I stepped inside, darkness engulfed me, its damp breath wrapping around my skin. A graying wallpaper peeled away from the walls, coagulating with time, manifesting the faces of the sorrowful etched into its texture. Each face contorted in a silent scream, an echo of the past. The air crackled, thick with an electric tension, and I knew I was no longer alone. Flickering shadows danced in the corners, shapes that writhed and elongated, forming grotesque facsimiles of what once had been. I felt the air shift, a whisper curling around my ear, but no words emerged, only a chilling promise that all the lost souls were here, beckoning my presence as though I were their long-awaited guest at some dreadful reunion. "Help us," a raspy voice broke through the shadows, pulling my attention towards a decrepit staircase spiraled with dread, leading into the depths below. Without thought, I began to descend, each step resonating with a metallic groan until the ground beneath felt alive, pulsing with the heartbeat of the forsaken. The basement door yawned open, revealing a cavern dark and suffocating, like the belly of some ancient beast. A faint glimmer caught my attention, an ethereal light flickered through the shadows, a beacon that felt both inviting and foreboding. Drawn forward, I crossed the threshold into the abyss below. The light pulsated, illuminating an altar sculpted from the very earth. The air thickened, saturated with sorrow and longing, while the flickering glow revealed the truth of what lay before me. Dozens of broken dolls scattered across the ground, each one cracked, their glassy eyes dull and lifeless. They were not just toys, they were trapped souls, their essence bound to these hollow shells, forever longing for release. I shuddered, understanding the unfathomable despair that gripped them, a tugging at my very spirit that whispered, "Save us. Help us find rest." But as I knelt to touch one, feeling the cool porcelain against my fingertips, a bone-chilling scream jolted through the air, reverberating like set off by an unseen trigger. Around the altar, shadowy figures emerged, their forms writhing in a frenzy, clawing at the darkness. "Leave her." A commanding voice roared, sharp and potent. I recognized the very figure that first approached me, its hollow eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "They belong to me," the dolls began to murmur, their tiny voices rising in a chorus of despair, pleading for liberation even as the shadows surged closer, threatening to envelop me entirely. I backed away, panic igniting anxiety within me as the presence of the creature pushed deeper into the chasm of my mind. "You were brought here to understand the cost, the price of life and death," it hissed, barely inches from my face, a ghastly face that was a reflection of all that I feared becoming. "To awaken the desperate cries of those lost. Choose wisely." As the shadows enveloped me, I felt a cold grip upon my heart, a visceral sensation of power wrapping around me like vice, urging me to succumb to the whispers. The doll's eyes glimmered with urgency, their mournful pleas drowning out the chaos that resided in the dark, but I only had moments left before the suffocated despair would consume me wholly. I drew a trembling breath, and just as I was about to scream, the darkness enveloped me entirely, everything blipping into shadow. The last thing I glimpsed before the void took me was the eyes of the doll, reflecting my own fear, one soul toward another. And that revelation pitched me into the spiraling depths, arms flailing as I tumbled back into the cacophony of grief and despair, a part of an eternal cycle from which there would be no escape. I woke, feeling the tremors of reality crack beneath me, a weight crashing down that crushed the breath from my lungs. My eyes flew open, but what met me was not light, it was dark and coarse all around, choking my senses. Somehow, I knew I was not alone. The echoes of despair and joy twisted together in a grotesque symphony, inviting me back into the web of shadows. No. I had fought too hard, I refused to be just another puppet in their play. Pulling myself up from the pit where warm stones pulsed beneath my hands, I managed to comprehend my surroundings. Thick fog seeped in, laden with the lamentations of the damned. I was back in the village, but it felt the atmosphere like a living thing, coiling around my wrists, pulling me toward the epicenter of a malignant force. I stumbled forward, a part of me searching for escape, another curious, a thirst for the truth that had haunted my every breath since I first set foot in this cursed hell. Then, there they were, the figures of those I had encountered in my previous existence. They swirled like leaves caught in a tempest, their expressions a mixture of merciful compassion and futile anger as they beckoned me towards the dilapidated church at the heart of the village. I hesitated, my instincts roaring in protest, but a compulsion pushed me forward. What truths did they hold? What had I yet to discover? As I neared, the church erupted with life, the crumbling doors swung open, unleashing blinding light, a stark contrast to the tenebrous grasp of the outside world. Shadows writhed at the threshold, snapping back in repulsion, leaving only the glow of the church illuminating the hearts of the lost. With a deep breath, I crossed the divide. Once inside, I gasped at the sight. The altar radiated an azure light that shattered the darkness, revealing intricate carvings of pain-laden memories, the stories of generations interwoven into every grain of wood. I moved closer, entranced, but no sooner had I stepped within its sanctum than a bone-chilling howl pierced the silence. I instinctively turned. The shadows coiled around me, growing thorny and jagged, and within them, I could feel the pulsing hearts of the spirits lurking, their cries echoing fiercely against the walls. From the throng emerged a new entity, a daunting figure cloaked in shadow. Its eyes shimmered with a cold light, reflecting a past that was all too familiar. "You think yourself a liberator," it hissed, "but you are nothing more than a reset button for an endless cycle of despair. None who cross this threshold escape unchanged." "No!" I shouted, defiance boiling within me. "I am not part of your game. I will not allow you to consume every last strand of life and happiness." The entity laughed, a sound so hollow that it echoed in my bones. "Did you think you could save them? Did you forget already? You are their keeper, as I am yours." Panic gripped me as the reality sank in. Every soul I had encountered, every plea echoed back to me with greater intensity. They were bound to me's eye to them. I looked down at my hands and recoiled. They shrank, became spectral, flickering between flesh and shadow, my essence being slowly drawn into their torment. Suddenly, every face I had seen materialized around me, their mouths pursed in silent screams. "Choose!" they cried. "Join us!" The chamber shook violently, a chasm expanding beneath the altar's glow, but a spark of clarity ignited within me. This was not just a cruel trick, it was my chance. What if the cycle of torment could be reversed? I clutched the altar, gathering strength, as I recalled the words of the incantation I had once recited with trepidation: "Release." I roared, channeling every ounce of my spirit into the words that escaped. The faces hushed, a stillness enveloping the air around me. The azure light exploded into a kaleidoscope of colors, a fleeting warmth igniting the cavern, dispelling the shadows momentarily, yet just as quickly, darkness surged back, swallowing the light. "Foolish mortal!" the entity bellowed, anger intertwining with laughter. "Your defiance is meaningless. They will pull you down into despair." And then, it came. Tendrils of darkness wrapped around my throat, squeezing tighter and tighter, making it almost impossible to breathe, and I felt their cries beat against my heart like a war drum, their anguish seeping into my soul. But amidst this struggle, an unexpected truth swallowed me whole. I had not come here to save them, I had come to save myself. The realization surged through my veins. I was the missing piece of their puzzle. If I could accept the weight of their longing, maybe I could break the cycle. Perhaps the shadows were not the enemy but part of the intricate web of existence. Enough. I gasped, finding the strength rooted deep within, the unyielding spirit of those who had suffered. I will not be claimed. I choose to remember to carry your stories with me. A chasm opened within me, revealing embers of hope and grief intertwined. The shadows stilled, hesitating, as if caught in my vortex of struggle, and the whispers began to transform, rising to a fever pitch. "Release it to me." As I drew the light toward me with everything I had, the wails of the souls intersected with fervor, flooding the air with vengeful cries and lilting freedom. For the first time, I felt unity beneath the despair, the very essence of mourning binding itself around my core, and just as the shadows lunged again to grip me in their vengeful maw, an explosion of brilliant light pulsed through the room. It ripped apart the grieving silence, exposing the hidden truth. I had become the link, the messenger between their stories and the light of salvation, and in that moment, the village began to tremble, walls cracking, echoes swirling as life surged forth. Suddenly, it occurred to Meth light would not vanish, it would persist through pain, woven into the fabric of existence. They would live on in my every breath, a testament to their existence as I carried their stories forward. "Remember us." Their voices echoed in chorus, but the shadows had begun to retreat, shrieking in rage as they neared their demise. Evil cannot linger where memories are cherished, but as the darkness faltered, I felt my grip loosen. The entity screeched, its form warping in a final paroxysm of despair. "You will never be free." It roared, as the remnants of its agony crashed against me, and then, pain ripped through my heart, a last herald of their existence as I felt the rift deepen, the shadows gnashing at my heels. But I knew they would never truly die, their stories would find life within me. As the ravenous darkness snapped, I found my voice, every broken soul shall be remembered. Then everything shattered into brilliant light, lifting me up as the village melted away, and finally, the world faded to silence. I lay in stillness, gasping for breath, as light spilled across my vision. But as I sat up, fully anchored in reality, I knew the struggle was far from over. For within my heart resided not just memory but an ever-watchful presence, a darkness lurking just beyond the edge, waiting for a moment of vulnerability to emerge again. And now, as I piece together what remains of my life, I can't help but wonder, will darkness claim me once more, or will I be strong enough to hold back shadows that whisper my name?